The Josh Hayes on Instagram asks, you are inviting 3 writers to dinner, living or dead, but must choose them from different continents. Whom do you choose? That's a good question. All right, I'm going to say Dostoevsky, Marcel Proust, and James Joyce. And I'm not even going to say anything at this dinner. I'm just going to let the 3 of them sit there. Didn't Proust and Joyce have like some kind of awkward interaction or something? Anyway, I'm just gonna let the 3 of them sit there and just kind of see what happens. Cinematic Pages on Instagram asks, how and when did you get into literature? How much do you think literature and art play a role in a person's education? Besides literature, what other arts do you enjoy? I think that it plays a significant role. I got into literature, I was really into reading, from a very, very young age. I don't even know how old. I come from a family of teachers. My mother was a teacher. She majored in French and French literature. She took me on weekly excursions to our local library where we each checked out the maximum allowed amount of books. I went through a slump in reading during my teenage years and then came back fiercely at, I think, 19 or 20, right there at the end of my teenage years, but came back fiercely. And that is when I would say I really started reading literature very seriously. I believe that it's the only thing that can really expand your consciousness and add to your final vocabulary, as Richard Rorty refers to it, or expand your world through rich words of vast meaning in the Wittgenstein sense of the limits of your world. To study great literature is to study life. And like Montaigne, it is a way of understanding how to live well. What other arts do you enjoy? Well, I love music. I love classical music. I love jazz. I love Charlie Parker, Bud Powell. I love Thelonious Monk. I love Dizzy Gillespie. I love Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Debussy, Erik Satie. I love Wagner, Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky, Chopin. But I also like heavier and technical music, especially that of Animals as Leaders, and then some of the jazz fusion offshoots that drummer, Matt Garska, has been doing lately with some incredible musicians. I myself play drums and guitar. Sometimes I like to listen to Creole music, especially like Cedric Watson. I love painting and sculpture and the visual arts, the fine arts. I've got a lot of art books that I look through often. I love M.C. Escher. Film I really love, but I hardly ever watch any of it. My favorite movie is Fanny och Alexander, which is Ingmar Bergman. And 1984, his 5.5 hour long made for Swedish television movie. I watched that every year at Christmas time. Beyond the Epilogue on Instagram asks, do you think any classic works of literature are frequently misunderstood? If so, can you give an example? Yes, I think they're all frequently misunderstood. I think even the concept of a classic work of literature is frequently misunderstood. But let's use the example of Moby Dick, which is my absolute favorite American novel. Yet it's often misunderstood or perhaps mistaught in schools. I have an idea that's been in the works for a while that really there's a whole wealth of great literature that probably should be saved until people are about 30 years old. And before that, we should just give some guidelines and then let the students pick the books that speak to them and that they actually enjoy reading. If you're a good teacher, then you can tease meaning and lessons out of any piece of writing. Works like Moby Dick are often misunderstood because of a couple of reasons. One, we hear about these books so much that we sort of feel like we've already read them, and concomitant with that, we don't need to read them. We also, hear from the groans of others in all of its multiplicity about these works to the point where we come to them with more of a passive attitude of, okay, you're such a great book, show me what you got. That's not really how writing works. Anything of real value is going to take some effort. It is that effort that's inherent in the value. I think the best way that we could prevent a classic work of literature from being misunderstood is to take it upon ourselves to pick up that work later in life when we have more experience we can bring to it. Discard all of the cultural baggage accumulated around that work. Admiral Carp on YouTube asked me the hardest question of my life. If you could only take one book with you to a desert island, which one would it be and why? Someone commented somewhere and said something about how Umberto Eco said that his would be a phone book, which is classic Eco humor. I thought a lot about this, and it would have to be the King James Bible. Why King James? Well, because William Tyndale's language is so rich and has so much power, as exemplified in the Psalms and Proverbs. I can't think of any book that I've experienced yet that sums up and presents the human condition better than the Bible. It also points to hope that's outside of ourselves, which on this desert island I would very much need. Maybe this is a cheat. Maybe this is like saying the complete works of Shakespeare, because it's not just one book. The Bible is definitely a library of books, and so many different forms. But I mean, in one book, it's the whole gamut of literature, really. Like Thomas C. Foster talks about in his book, How to Read Like a Professor, so much of Western literature has been informed by Shakespeare and the Bible. George Salas asks a good question on Instagram. How important is the author's personal history in relation to a work, and should one be allowed to taint the other? Great question. Going back to an earlier answer, this again, it really is starting to shape my opinion that we should leave the author out of things completely until later. It makes me think of in William Gaddis's The Recognitions. He talks about how the artist or the writer is the human shambles which follow behind the work of art. That's perfect. I want to experience the art and not the human shambles. I don't think we should be allowed to taint it. Now, I think we should study them on their own. This, of course, was one of the salient objectives of the new criticism and formalisms, where we study the work as an artifact and nothing outside of it, which has its own detriment, because oftentimes bringing in the author gives context and illuminates the writing. But in general, I'm a reader. I'm not a biographer. So I want to experience the art. Now, this is a pointed question in that it came out of a little skirmish or conflagration on Goodreads around Alexander Theroux. But then also, we think about David Foster Wallace with the T.J. Maxx biography, and how that has tainted the work and cast a shadow over it to the point where now you almost feel like you have to be apologetic for liking Infinite Jest or any of his artworks. Let me be clear. If someone told me that all of the money author XYZ makes off of book sales goes to furthering human trafficking, then it would be a closed matter for me. I would not purchase the work. If someone told me that this novel that I love came from an author who was now convicted and imprisoned for unspeakable acts, but it was a really well done piece of writing, I would probably read it. And there are a couple of reasons. One, this would give me insight into the psyche of someone like that. And I'm the type of person, sort of like William T. Vollmann, where I'm interested in the other. As dark and messed up as they may be, I'm interested in what they have to say and what their life experience is. I'm interested in knowing the ins and outs of this world in which I live, peopled by people about whom I would never understand if I didn't have access into those worlds, but it would have to be well written. But the rub with Alexander Theroux comes from about 50 years ago. He was a teacher and there were some allegations from a student. They were taken into the court system and it was dismissed. Like I said, 50 years have gone by. Theroux is married. He has 2 daughters. I mean, he's an octogenarian now. Clean record ever since. Should I let that taint the work? No, I don't believe I should. I actually believe in grace. The other thing with Theroux is the misogyny that features in his writing. And there are other books, and like in the interview on Bookworm with Michael Silverblatt, that address this topic directly with Thoreau, so I don't really have anything to add to it other than to say that it is at this point a very dead horse, and that it is clear that it is one of a multitude of topics that Thoreau brings into his books. And I think it's a shame that we live in a culture where one hint of a misstep can beleaguer you for life. I can't imagine the books we would have had Thoreau not been panned. I think about these Disney films I watched as a child. They really haven't taken hold for a lot of us. You know, like Beauty and the Beast. The whole point was to show you that even though someone has all of the signatures of a beast, we shouldn't just write them off and join in with mass hysteria and sensationalism against the person, because we have to remember that an enemy is someone whose story we haven't heard. I have to also make the point that during the course of some of these different conversations on these topics, it does become apparent that the main source of the opinions is second and third hand. And so again, I think we are tuned to the point where if we hear through the grapevine that so-and-so did something, we immediately close them off. We label them and we shelve them and put them aside, and we say, oh no, because I think we're so terrified, and we ban them for life, which is a really scary environment, honestly. This is a sort of literary McCarthyism that puts me in a sort of straitjacket feel where all it would take is one little thing, one little match, and I could be destroyed forever, to the point where people would have an opinion about me before even looking into anything about the ordeal. But enough about all that. All I'm saying is, have some grace, enjoy the books, and know that we're all messed up. I've just had a shower and a shave, and I feel magnificent except for this 50-pound weight that is hanging from my bottom eyelid in the form of a sty, the eyelid. Dying, Sleeping, Traveling on Instagram asks, what's the best book you dislike for reasons of personal taste? Inversely, what's the worst book you like? What's the best book you dislike? Well, if it's the best book, or if it's worthy of being called the best book, I probably wouldn't dislike it. And if it's the worst book, I probably wouldn't like it. I think I know what you're getting at there, though. You're getting at what's a book that's highly praised, but that I don't like? And then what is a book that is panned and I do like? If that's what you're getting at, I'm really gonna have to think about that. Yeah, I'm really gonna have to think about that one. I'll get back to you. D.H. Sayer and Mr. QWFWQ Quifflewick, Mr. Quifflewick on Instagram. They both ask, how has fiction influenced your own writing? Can you tell us about your books? What are you working on writing-wise? And L.S. Popovich also asked the same thing. Can you let us in on some of your work? So I am going to oblige. I would like to point out that for me, it is extremely dangerous to talk about your work while it is in progress. This sort of, in my experience, this lets the steam out of your momentum. And you find that you have less propulsive power when you go back to it. The only thing I will say is that it is sort of a fragmentary memoir, and it breaks almost every writing rule that I've come across. But nonetheless, the way that I write is longhand first. I use pen and a moleskin or a Leuchtturm journal, and I go through and just write without any attention to, segmenting out dialogue, paragraph breaks. It's sort of like the way Kerouac originally wrote On the Road. I just don't worry about any of that kind of stuff. The only breaks you see are section breaks, and those are split off by quotations that I use as epigrams. And so I just go through and nail a first draft. This one, I'm about halfway through this book. And for a book length, I try to at least fill up one of these, however much that is. But it gives you a pretty high word count with which to work. And especially with the work that I'm doing here, this is going to be a larger one. But here you go, I'll give you a taste. This particular section with an epigram taken from Heart Crane. As silent as a mirror is believed, realities plunge in silence by. If I am not careful, I will squander a gift and a lifetime trying to articulate the inarticulable, the ineffable. Like a firefly in a jar, I will wink out my last light, trying to squeeze myself between the lid and the lip, instead of respecting the glass prison and lighting up the space I can know. Proust called them epiphanies, involuntary memory. Woolf called them moments of being. Musil, daylight mysticism. I once referred to the moment as hyper-awareness. It is that fleeting moment of excruciating aliveness that C.S. Lewis called being surprised by joy. What is it like? Ribbon flutter, sparrow wings, finger brushings, minnow flits, bubble float, cloud puff, eyelash brushings, sand raking, leaf flutter, vapor burst, almost touch, wind swipe, rain patter, soul grope, yellow sick, blue thought, winter whisper, tree sweep, water drip, butterfly taunt, promise ache, head spin, heart swallow, word hushing, hollow dip, dust shatter, nearly hurt, lake ripple, pulse squeeze, throat thicken, summer tease, autumn hush, pebble toss, mountain loom, tether jerk, fever rattle, thunder rush, lightning swipe, linen calm, wind list, eye bat, cilium tickle, sky graze, stomach whisk, spirit pant, life flash, memory throb, mind twinge, psyche spin, moment clap. Anyway, it's that feeling of opening your eyes even though they weren't closed, and realizing you've been asleep all your life and you're awake for the first time. More than awake, you're new, you're real, the world is real. All before was a dream, a prelude to the vast, unspooling possibilities unnameable, but filling your head and your heart contracts, and you smile, and you think you may cry, and all you want to do is hold on to the moment for as long as you can, but you already feel it fleeing, leaving the room through an unopened window. You feel its feathers as they slide off your fingertips. You grip your hand into a longing fist, but in the end, you have only that single unseen feather as a reminder of what could be, what almost was, and so you either fashion that feather into a quill, or you poke it into the band of a hat you will never wear. So there you have it. I have no clue when I'll be done with this, and I have no clue who in the world's going to publish it. Fiction has influenced my writing tremendously. I think Annie Dillard talks about that we write from other literature and not from life. And when I first read that, I thought, what? But the more that I've thought through it, the more truth I feel is in it. Paper Pills gives us a little quote from Roberto Bolaño to preface her question. Reading is like thinking, like praying, like talking to a friend, like expressing your ideas, like listening to other people's ideas, like listening to music, like looking at the view, like taking a walk on the beach. And here's her question. How has reading impacted your mental health? Oh, greatly, exponentially. Before I was a big reader, I was completely normal and sane. And now I'm just off the rails. No, but seriously, books can greatly contribute to one's mental health. It reminds you that you're not alone in many things. I think one of the greatest torments to our mental health is the feeling that we're going through something that absolutely no one will understand. And that just creates a vicious cycle that takes us further and further away from our center. But reading widely and gravitating towards things with people who are dealing with stuff that you deal with can really open your eyes to the fact that we're not alone, and all of us are messed up in one way or another, and that we need each other. One of the best ways we can connect with one another and to cement ourselves in a better mental grounding is through reading. Reading is like having a conversation. One way I've heard it put is that we have over 2,000 years of recorded thought, and that is a great wealth to us who know how to spend time with it and read through it and weigh and consider. Because what we find in all of this recorded thought, in all of this literature, is that we get to take a look at what has been tried and what has resulted. And that's true in many different contexts. So apply that as you see fit. But literature is our way of answering that plea that Milan Kundera brings up in The Unbearable Lightness of Being. It's been some time since I've read it, but it's something about, we only have one life to live, so we can't try out these different lives and see which one is best. We've only got this one shot. In a way, literature gives us a way to try out these different lives, to see what people's experiences have been, what worked and what doesn't work, and then we get to choose from what has gone before. What a privilege. And finally, the last question is from my beautiful wife. And this was delivered in person. She came and perused my shelves and formulated this incredible question. Kerouac, Vollmann, and Joyce throw a party in my honor. Which 10 non-family people do I invite? What is the venue? What would happen at the party? I would invite the following 10 people, and I would place them at separate tables in pairs. At table 1 would be Harold Bloom and J.K. Rowling. Table 2, Lillian Hellman and Mary McCarthy. Table 3, David Foster Wallace and Amy Hungerford. Table 4, William F. Buckley and Gore Vidal. And table 5, William Faulkner and Ernest Hemingway. The venue would be Thomas Pynchon's house, and the event would be to discuss the merits of reviewing books on YouTube. Made all the more interesting by the fact that the 3 people hosting me, William T. Vollmann, James Joyce, and Jack Kerouac, have never even been on the internet.